Hey beautiful humans, I'm RidersDX and welcome to my channel. Today we've got a really interesting discussion on the hypothetical of what if Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 was a free-to-play game. Now before we start this video, I just want to let you know this was actually recorded like a few weeks ago before the Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 announcement, so I'm gonna say some things, as if like it wasn't announced yet, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I still think that this video is really interesting. Like, it definitely brings up a really good discussion about whether or not this game would be more successful if it was free to play. So yeah, just tune in and let's get started. One thing that I really want to bring up that I've seen people bring up sometimes, but like not too frequently recently, is what if Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 could be a free-to-play kind of game? Like, is that something that they should consider? Is that something that would help this game, or is it something that might hurt this game in the future? And so I thought this was an interesting question that I thought about, because we already have a platform fighter game that was free-to-play, and that was Multiverses. And that game, it looked like it was going to become like the biggest thing in the world, and then something happened and it just kind of like fell to pieces, and now we're just kind of playing a waiting game to see when it does come back in 2024, is it really going to make that big anticipated comeback that it really wants, or is it basically just dead in the ditch forever? It's a very interesting question that will get answered in 2024. But in the meantime, Nickelodeon All Star Brawl is like its closest competitor at this point, and Nickelodeon All Star Brawl didn't really have the smoothest adventure itself. I mean, it got announced, got a little bit of hype around it and such, it got released, people played it for a while, and then it just sort of died down. Even though these games came out in like different ways, they both basically had the same trajectory. It's like they were both announced with a lot of hype. When they came out, they both had a lot of initial hype going into the game, and it seemed like it was going to be something that was going to be very long lasting and such. And then the games basically just fizzled out, and it got to the point where like no one really cared about these games anymore. And so even though they both had different like ways of going about how the game was sold, whether it be like the regular retail price with Nickelodeon All Star Brawl, or being a free to play game with Multiverses, they both had the same outcome essentially. And so I'm sitting here now thinking that, like, does it actually matter if this game becomes free to play or not? And so when it comes to like a free to play option for Nickelodeon All Star Brawl, I don't necessarily think it really needs to do that at this point. I feel like if you're interested in the game, you're gonna get it. I mean, it's really not that expensive, to be honest, and I feel like with free to play games, they're very much like pick up and play kind of games, and so it's very easy to just download it from the store and just kind of get into it like it's nothing. But with something like Nickelodeon All Star Brawl, it definitely requires the player to like commit a certain amount of time to get to a good enough skill to play the game adequately, and I feel like that's not something very commonly seen in a lot of free-to-play games, at least to my knowledge anyway. I mean, sure, there might be a bunch of free-to-play games where you can upgrade a character to no end and practice to no end and become really skilled players, but if you want to just jump into the game and have fun, that's an option too for most free-to-play games. Not with something like Nickelodeon All Star Brawl or Multiverses. I mean, you could jump into it and play with a bunch of like dumb CPUs and be just fine, but if you go online, then like there's no hope for you. You really need to get good at the game to have some like decent chances of playing online and such. And so that's why I don't know the free-to-play formula really helped Multiverses that much. I mean, it was nice for Multiverses in terms of like being able to play it with like anyone and such, but at the same time, it was very intimidating to get into because, as soon as you get into the online field, you're being paired with these players that are just like that much better than you. Even with the ranked mode, like it was just really hard to like really get into it as a new player. And this is coming from someone that plays Smash Brothers like basically casually. Like, I'll play it if it's there and my friends want to play it and such, but I'm not someone that's gonna dedicate like hours to get good at the game. And as a result, if I go against anyone that's even a little bit skilled in Smash Brothers, I'm automatically gonna lose, and I'm totally fine with that. I mean, Smash Brothers, it's a fun game, but it's just not really my scene. I'll be honest. I'm much more of like an action adventure platformer kind of guy, and so I love playing games by myself, going through these like campaigns and just going on these like long epic adventures. That's my thing. And if Smash Bros is your thing, then that's totally fine too. But that's why I don't really know the free-to-play formula really helped Multiverses all that much. It certainly helped it to reach a bigger audience, but the problem is, despite reaching that big audience, it had a hard time retaining that audience. And so I think what you can take from that is, if you did make Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 free to play, it definitely would reach more people and give it a higher chance of being successful. But you need to have some kind of game plan to maintain that interest. I feel like that's where Multiverses really faltered, is that it had so many like big ideas and it was going to be like this big epic thing and just keep on going and going. But unfortunately, throughout the free-to-play like beta, it is a beta now. I think it was always a beta, but it definitely is much more of a beta now than it was before. But throughout the beta, they ran into all these like different issues and balancing things and such. They had to fix that absolutely prolonged like how much they could add to the game and really keep it alive. And so as a result, Multiverses kind of faltered because it was a little too big for its own good. Basically, it was really popular and had tons of people playing it, but there was a bunch of issues that had to be fixed, and they weren't easy fixes. They were fixes that needed to take time to like really develop and such. And so it sort of makes sense why the game eventually had to be taken down for a 2024 release now. Like thinking back on its journey, it just had so many things that had to be done to really like polish it up and such. And so in Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2, it does have an advantage over Multiverses in the fact that it is a sequel. And so they've already had to go through a lot of the like learning pains through making the original Nickelodeon All Star Brawl. And so we're probably going to have all the original characters that were in the first game come over to this game, and they're basically going to have the same movesets but just kind of polished up a little bit for a better gaming experience. And so Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 already has an advantage over Multiverses if it becomes free to play, in the sense that the game is already mechanically working well enough that it was able to like be like the original game. And so the sequel doesn't really have to worry as much about it besides for new characters. Another thing though is that if they're going to make this free to play, they really do need to have a concrete plan on how to continually add content to the game. Like you can't just add a bunch of content the first couple months and stuff and then just take your time and drag it out a little bit longer before you release even more content. I mean, this stuff has to be planned in advance enough that people will not get tired of this game. I mean, people will get tired eventually, but you rather people get tired at different points of playing the game rather than like all at the same time. You know what I'm saying? So I think if Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 can just solidify its mechanics a little bit more and have a full-on game plan of how they plan to support themselves to be a free-to-play game, then I honestly think it could work. I mean, even if it was like a retail game, you'd still want to be updated adequately, but arguably it's not as important if it's a retail game because they already made their profit, and so there's not nearly as much incentive to continue updating the game. And if that's the route they want to go with, then you know that's the route they should choose. They should just price it as usual and just add content at their own pace. And if they're okay with letting the game just die after a while, then that's their choice, honestly. But if it's free to play, then I'm assuming that you want the game to stay open for a long time, because as long as the game is continually active, you'll continue to make more and more profit off of it. And that is the beauty of a free to play model, is that as you keep the game going and keep adding more content into it, people will keep playing it, people will keep buying like cosmetics and things like that, and it is really just like a gold mine in terms of revenue. And if that's what you need to make Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 the great game that it could be, then you know what, so be it. And so I think overall I would be fine with a free-to-play model. I think if they handle it correctly, then it certainly can work. Like, look at what happens in Multiverses and try to learn from that. You know, make sure that you have your eggs in a basket before you go ahead and pursue that. You know, don't do it when you're not really sure of a game plan in terms of how to keep it alive yet. Fair enough, you need to take some time to like work out the kinks and make sure it actually works and functions well. But beyond that, making sure that like you don't just make it free to play and just expect people to continue playing it without really having to update it that much, because that's not going to happen. In a world that's so competitive now and everyone is trying to grab your attention, it's more important than ever for the developers of these games to like make the content continuously engaging to make people stick to it. It's just so much easier to like pull people away from like a game now than it used to be. And so something to keep in mind. And I guess we'll just see if Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 ends up being a free to play game or if it's just gonna be a regular retail price game. I'm gonna bet on the latter. I feel like Game Mill wouldn't like pursue that for some reason. I just don't see them like going through the trouble. But you never know, honestly. If the data shows that the game could be very profitable doing it that way, then I'm sure they would do it. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Would you like to see Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 be a free to play game, or do you want them to keep it as a retail game like it was with the first game? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and be sure to subscribe to this channel if you want to stay up to date with Nickelodeon All Star Brawl 2 news. Every time we get some kind of little tidbit of information, I'm going to report it here. I'll theorize as to whether or not it's actually real, and then we'll just have a fun time gossiping about the game until it actually comes out, gets announced. So, alright y'all, thank you so much. This is Riders, riding out.